Now, broadcasting from the underground command post, deep in the bowels of a hidden bunker, somewhere under the brick and steel of a nondescript building, we've once again made contact with our leader, Mark Levin.
Hello, everybody. Mark Levin here. Our number, 877-381-3811, 877-381-3811. We've got a ton today. You don't want to miss 1 minute of this program, honestly. We're going to deal with immigration. We're going to deal with Obamacare, what's going on with the Gorsuch nomination and so forth. You won't want to miss this, starting right now. Most of you have heard by now of this horrific rape in a high school in a liberal Democrat county, a bedroom community outside of Washington, D.C. in Maryland by the name of Montgomery County. And it's a horrible, horrible story. Fox News reports new, brutal details emerged Monday in the alleged rape of a 14-year-old girl at a Maryland high school by two male students, at least one of whom was in the country illegally. The unidentified student at Rockville High School in Rockville, Maryland, 14 years old, was violently raped, sodomized, made to perform oral sex in a campus bathroom stall by the two males, according to court records. Jose Montano, 17 from El Salvador, Henry Sanchez Milan, 18 from Guatemala, were charged with first-degree rape and 2 counts of first-degree sexual offense after they allegedly attacked the girl at 9 a.m. last Thursday. The Montgomery County Police in a statement said the victim was walking in a school hallway when she met 2 male students identified as Montano and Sanchez. Montano asked the victim to walk with him, and Montano asked the victim to engage in sexual intercourse. She refused. Montano asked the victim again and then forced her into a boys' bathroom and then into a stall. Montano and Sanchez both raped the victim inside the bathroom stall. They raped her multiple times, vaginally, orally, sodomized her. They spoke to each other in Spanish. Blood and male fluids were recovered from the scene by a forensic expert, according to court records. And it goes on. And it goes on. People ask, what can we do about this? How can this happen? An 18 and a 19-year-old? These are men. 17 and 18-year-old. In the school with the 14-year-old? I want to give you a little bit of history, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to tell you how we got here. There was a decision. This is in Men in Black, an entire chapter on immigration. This book was really before its time. A truly great exposition of what the court has done in so many areas. The 1982 Plyler versus Doe decision. I'm reading from it. This book is more than 10 years old. Is perhaps the most egregious of the court's immigration rulings. In the 1960s and 70s, a rising tide of illegal immigrants crossed the border from Mexico into Texas to take advantage of the better economic climate and quality of life in the United States. By 1975, the financial strain of the influx had started to choke the already crowded school systems in Texas border towns. In response, Texas enacted a new law concerning children not legally admitted to the United States that allowed local school districts to deny their enrollment and withheld from local school districts state funds to educate these children. Numerous lawsuits were brought on behalf of several children challenging the new law, which were consolidated in the case called Plyler, P-L-Y-L-E-R versus Doe. In a 5-4 decision in 1982, Justice William Brennan, writing for the majority, went so far as to extend the term person in the 14th Amendment to include illegal aliens by virtue of their physical presence in the United States. Moreover, Brennan found that the children of illegal immigrants weren't responsible for their illegal entry into the country. Therefore, quote, legislation directing the onus of a parent's misconduct against his children does not comport with fundamental conceptions of justice, unquote. Now, while the court recognized that there's no constitutionally enumerated right to a free public education, Brennan said in part in his decision, neither is a public education merely some governmental benefit indistinguishable from other forms of social welfare legislation. Both the importance of education in maintaining our basic institutions and the lasting impact of its deprivation on the life of the child mark the distinction. The American people have always regarded education and the acquisition of knowledge as matters of supreme importance. We've recognized the public schools as a most vital civic institution for the preservation of a democratic system of government, and these historic perceptions of the public schools as inculcating fundamental values necessary to the maintenance of a democratic political system have been confirmed by the observations of social scientists. But Brennan wasn't done. When he moved to the question of whether the Equal Protection Clause applied to extending social benefits to illegal aliens, he determined that because Texas had essentially delineated illegal aliens as a distinct class of people, they must be treated equally with every other person in the state. Not to do so in this instance, the provision of free public education, he said, would violate the Equal Protection Clause of the Constitution. So in Plyler, the court decided that any conglomeration of people, regardless of the reason for their classification under law, had to be treated identically with every other class of people. Brennan also said that irrespective of the financial burden imposed on the community or the state by illegal aliens, the cost was not sufficient to justify preventing illegal immigrants from availing themselves of a free public education. Well, the minority opinion was written by Chief Justice Warren Burger, and I might add, Justice Byron White, appointed by John Kennedy, and Rehnquist, appointed by Nixon, later Chief Justice under Reagan. He wrote on their behalf saying this: this court makes no attempt to disguise that it is acting to make up for Congress's quote-unquote lack of effective leadership in dealing with the serious national problems caused by the influx of uncountable millions of illegal aliens across our borders. The failure of enforcement of the immigration laws over more than a decade and the inherent difficulty and expense of sealing our vast border have combined to create a grave socioeconomic dilemma. It is a dilemma that has not yet been fully assessed, let alone addressed. However, it is not the function of the judiciary to provide quote-unquote effective leadership simply because the political branches of government fail to do so. And now you know. The Supreme Court has also reached into other areas to find rights for immigrants that the Constitution, Congress, and the executive branch never intended. In 1973, in a case called Griffiths, the court ruled that a state could not deny non-citizens the right to take the bar exam and become licensed, practicing attorneys. Again, thanks to the hidden meaning found in the Equal Protection Clause. In 1977, in Nyquist v. Mauchlet, the court ruled again, 5-4, that it was unconstitutional for New York to require resident aliens to at least apply for U.S. citizenship before becoming eligible for financial aid for education. And there's more. The court, in a number of cases over the last 5 decades, has determined not only that aliens, even illegal aliens, are persons as defined in the 5th and 14th Amendments, but also that their status is increasingly indistinguishable from that of citizens. So while the Constitution specifically gives Congress the sole authority to determine how many immigrants may enter the country, how immigrants may become citizens, and whether those immigrants should be able to avail themselves of benefits of U.S. citizenship, the Supreme Court has chosen on many occasions now to ignore the express direction of the founders and usurp the authority for itself. In 1969, this case started a lot of it, Graham versus Richardson. Harry Blackmun. He wrote, "We agree with the 3-judge court in Pennsylvania that the justification of limiting expenses," this is a welfare case, "is particularly inappropriate and unreasonable when the discriminated class consists of aliens." You had states that wanted to limit welfare only to citizens, or legal immigrants? The Supreme Court said no. In 1976, the Supreme Court ruled in Hampton versus Mo Sun Wong that citizenship was an unconstitutional requisite to holding a government job. In Sugarman versus Dugall, New York Civil Service case, 1973, the court found that while states could indeed differentiate between citizens and non-citizens in certain types of jobs, those jobs had to be very narrowly defined and limited specifically to the function of the government, such as law enforcement and senior policy-making positions. Citizenship was not a material requirement for other civil service positions, so requiring it for those positions violated an immigrant's 14th Amendment rights. The court has nationalized the issue of immigration. It's nationalized the issue of immigration. It has taken it away from Congress. Really began in 1969. Some cases even before that, but that's the harbinger. And the 1982 case of Plyler versus Doe, that was the nail in the coffin of Congress's plenary role on the matter of immigration. Free schooling, welfare benefits, in-state tuition, virtually every benefit that is available to an American citizen as the welfare state grows and the administrative state grows, the court has ruled, must apply to illegal aliens because illegal aliens are now persons for the purpose of the Constitution's 5th and 14th Amendments. They're always human beings. That's not the point. Ignore the liberal idiocy. But persons for the purpose of certain constitutional protections and so forth. You know, in a brilliant dissent that I am trying to find here, Justice Rehnquist, as a matter of fact, it was, I think, the Plyler case. Yes, it was. Rehnquist makes a brilliant point about the Constitution. Actually, it was in the 1973 Sugarman case. It doesn't matter. Here's what he said. The court, by holding that a citizen alien classification is suspect in the eyes of our Constitution, fails to mention, let alone rationalize, the fact that the Constitution itself recognizes a basic difference between citizens and aliens. That distinction is constitutionally important in no less than 11 instances in a political document the Constitution noted for its brevity. Not only do the numerous classifications on the basis of citizenship that are set forth in the Constitution cut against both the analysis used and the results reached by this court in these cases. The very amendment which the court reads to prohibit classification based on citizenship establishes the very distinction which the court now condemns as suspect. I'll be right back.
Mark Levin.
There's not a conservative sanctuary city in America, is there, ladies and gentlemen? There's not a conservative sanctuary state in America. This is liberal insanity, and they have run amok. And wherever they are, they create violence and hate and destitution, regardless of their ideology, their propaganda, and their phony promises. When you watched, in part, if you did, the Gorsuch hearings today, most of you, I'm sure, were disgusted by the Democrats damning the Constitution, damning our heritage, damning the founders of this country, damning them, damning our principles. Absolutely incredible. The Democrat Party does not stand for Americanism. That doesn't mean many of its members don't. Hard-working Americans who grew up as Democrats or members of the Democrat Party. I get it. But the Democrats in Congress, the Democrats who run for president, are loathsome. Loathsome. The Constitution is the rule of law. Without it, we have no law. All this talk. I heard this Juan Williams on the 5. Unfortunately, the volume was up while I was prepping. He's very upset. Every time we talk about this, he says, 98% of the people who are here legally or illegally don't do this sort of thing. Now, what kind of a stupid argument is that? The fact of the matter is, statistics aside, let's talk about human beings. If one or both of these barbarians are illegal aliens, one certainly is, this event, this horrific, horrible attack on this young girl would not have occurred. This isn't about statistics. This is about human beings. And yet the liberals pretend that they care about human beings. How can any mayor, any city council that declares itself a sanctuary to illegal immigrants care about American citizens or their safety? They don't know who these people are. Same with these phony state attorneys general. Democrat hacks care about power and votes, and that is it. And the American Criminal Liberties Union and all the rest of these phony front groups and CARE, who go into court to challenge a perfectly constitutional, legal executive order to protect the American people, to ensure that refugees, so-called, coming into this country from now 6 countries, are properly vetted so Americans aren't harmed. This is what government is for. This is what the civil society is about. This is why people enter into this social compact. And yet the left in this country, the left which has hijacked the Democrat Party, the radical, hardcore left, we used to call it the new left. They advance their agenda. They pretend they're for the people. They pretend they're populists. They pretend and pretend. And look what they leave in their wake. Poverty, misery, racial division. Look what they leave in their wake. Lawlessness, jealousy, anger, even violence. And we have a hearing today where we're told that if you're a nominee to the Supreme Court who believes in holding the line on the Constitution, you're a radical. There's something wrong with you. You're a throwback. I'll be right back. You know, the Freedom Caucus in the House is the greatest collection of American patriotic politicians. So it comes under attack all the time. But we should be very thankful they exist. About 40 members, and the chairman of the Freedom Caucus is a wonderful member of the House of Representatives, Mark Meadows. Congressman, how are you, sir?
I'm doing great, Mark. It's great to be with you, one of the great patriots, and thank you for always speaking up for freedom and the Constitution.
Well, thank you, Congressman. Now, I want to talk about this, what I call Rhino Care, repeal in name only. There's an article that just came out on Reuters. It says some conservatives in Washington were fuming on Tuesday after an Obamacare rollback bill was tweaked by Republican leaders to delete a provision meant to crack down on illegal immigrants getting federal health care insurance coverage. It goes on, the provision would have allowed the Treasury Department to access data at the Department of Homeland Security to verify that health care tax credits went only to American citizens and legal permanent residents, not to illegal aliens. In a largely procedural move, it was dropped from the bill after the Senate parliamentarian determined that the Senate Finance Committee, which handles tax credits under the bill, does not have purview over the Department of Homeland Security. Sir, is the parliamentarian of the Senate running the country now?
Well, it would seem that way, Mark. I can tell you that I've had more excuses on why we can't do what is right for the American people in the last week based on what one parliamentarian, an unelected federal employee, has said or not said. And you know, we've gotten to the point where it's beyond ridiculous. We've got to do what's right for the American people, and that includes making sure that we've got a health care that's affordable, insurance rates that come down. But this particular bill that we've got before us right now, as you well know, doesn't really repeal Obamacare. It leaves most of it in place, and now we're going to add to it and give benefits to perhaps people that didn't have them before.
The Secretary of Health and Human Services, a former member of Congress, Tom Price, said, look, one thing I know we're not going to do is just have a clean repeal of Obamacare. I heard that, and I must tell you, I was completely flabbergasted. Why shouldn't we just have a complete repeal of Obamacare and go back to where we were? And I love the way the CBO and others talk about, 24 million people, 20 million, 14 million, and the liberals throw it around, will be without health care. Well, let me tell you something. If we stay with Obamacare for 2 or 3 more years, tens of millions or more are going to be without health care, aren't they, Congressman?
Well, you're right. It's in a death spiral. Rates are going up across the country, Mark, that are just unsustainable. I mean, people are having to make a decision between health care and their mortgage payment, and it's gotten unbelievably not only difficult to afford, but there's fewer choices. I can tell you, I'm on Obamacare. My premiums and deductibles make it where I've got to have almost $18,000 spent on an annual basis before I ever get anything that kicks in. And the American people have had enough. They want us to fix it and fix it today. And that's what we've got to do, not kick the can down and hope for some bill to pass in the Senate or later on to fix it in a bucket 3. We need to get it done and get it done right.
Bucket 3 meaning these supposed 3 phases. Let me ask you this, Congressman. What are your top problems with this so-called Republican replacement bill?
Well, the very top problem is it doesn't repeal the Obamacare insurance mandates and the essential health benefits, so it doesn't drive premiums down. So if we vote on this and it passes and becomes law, you still are going to have to buy the Obamacare plan. You still are going to get a subsidy, even though it's a different subsidy. So all we're doing is shifting around dollars. We're not doing anything to bring it the cost down. We're putting more federal dollars at it and assuming that it's going to be better. And I can tell you, for most Americans, it's not even better in a 10-year window. I mean, for those that are young, perhaps 21 to 40, it's better. But if you're 40 years of age or older, this CBO says that this is not going to benefit you in any substantial way. And so we've got to get rid of those essential health benefits, repeal it, and then replace it with association plans that allow you to buy cheaper policies. Rand Paul has put forth a plan that we endorse, but it's all about empowering the individual to have their own HSAs and be able to make their own choices, and this just doesn't get us there.
There's so much, my words, deceit and disinformation from the Republican leadership, the majority of Republicans promoting this. When I bring up health savings account, they say, well, we do that. No, they don't do that. It's capped, and it's limited on what you can purchase, like a government-certified health care plan. You're not free to save as much as you need and to buy whatever you want. Insurance companies are not free to offer whatever kind of policies they want. Once again, they're required to have all these mandates that Obama put in place, all these magical mandates. Somebody, a young man or woman who's on a family reaches the age of 26. I don't know. Let me ask you this, Congressman. When you were 25, were you on your parents' health care plan?
No, I already was married and have my own home and was on my own insurance, and it's all about, being personally responsible. And when we look at this, I wish that were the only issue, Mark. I mean, the real issue is just what you just said. The analysis was spot on. We have got to get away from mandating what insurance companies can provide and what people must buy. And, I mean, the federal government doesn't do anything well other than defend our country, and we've got to understand that more government doesn't mean more choices. In fact, it means fewer choices.
And it's funny, when you ask them if it'll lower the policies, they talk about the out years. Like like it's Mao's 5-year plan. They talk about, in the out years. Well, I don't care about the out years. How about that? We know that's not going to happen. We're going to fix Medicaid. We're going to block grant some of the funds so the states can decide if they want block grants or if they want direct subsidies. Well, the states get more money with direct subsidies. What do you think they're going to do? I mean, these aren't fixes, right. Congressman. What are they?
You're exactly right. It's an optional block grant. So, we may find 1 or 2 states possibly that would pick it up, but everybody will do the per capita. And then we have an optional mandatory work requirement. Now, if there's not an oxymoron there, an optional mandatory work requirement saying that we can allow states to actually put a work requirement in. Well, we can mandate that. Maine already does it. We don't have to pass a law. And here we are. Now, instead of mandating it, we're saying we're going to give you the option. And if you take the option, we're going to use hardworking American taxpayer dollars to pay you for doing what you should be doing already. It's just beyond ridiculous.
Why is it, Congressman Meadows, chairman of the Freedom Caucus, why is it that the more liberal wing of the Republican Party, the more progressive wing of the Republican Party, doesn't come under the kind of pressure that the constitutional conservative wing of the Republican Party does? For instance, we never hear that somebody's going to take on a liberal Republican in some primary and so forth, but we hear about you, we hear about the... Why is that?
You know, it's hard to say. What happens is it seems like big government wants to continue to perpetuate big government. And so there is a move towards keeping the power in Washington, D.C. You know, for me, if we can move it back to the states and make sure, and you've been a very big advocate of that, move it back from the states, get the power out of Washington, D.C., get it where hopefully members of Congress are actually passing real legislation that empowers the states. That's what we have to do. But big government actually tries to protect itself, and I think I'm afraid that's what we're seeing.
You know, I don't want to get into names and so forth, but I was speaking to the chairman of a very large organization that has a very large PAC. They raise about $40 million a year. And this chairman said, if, again, the Republican establishment or even the president starts to target conservatives such as Freedom Caucus conservatives who vote against this, then he said, we are going to target liberal members of the Republican Party, liberal members of the House, and we're going to go one for one, because apparently that's the only way the Republican Party in Washington, D.C. will understand that sometimes conservatives have good ideas and you ought to listen to them rather than try and take them out. Now, I'm not asking your approval, but I just want you to know some of us have had enough of this. I mean, the Freedom Caucus is like the bastion of liberty, the bastion of constitutionalism, and the fact that there's only 40 of you is crazy enough. But then they just pound away relentlessly to try and get you to buckle. You're under enormous pressure, aren't you?
Well, I am under enormous pressure, but let me tell you, your listeners and really advocates like yourself are the ones that come to my defense each and every day, and it's really the American people. It's what made our country great. When they come to my defense, it gives me really not only such energy, but it gives me hope for our country that once again we'll return it to its rightful owner, and that's the American people. And the Freedom Caucus and the wonderful guys that I get to serve with in the Freedom Caucus are all about liberty, and they're all about other people other than themselves. And hopefully cooler heads will prevail, and we'll see a good bill get passed in the House. But I can tell you this bill doesn't have the votes to pass, nor is it inclined to have votes unless they substantially change it to support lower premiums.
Has anybody threatened you and told you you're going to have a primary opponent if you don't come along with the program here?
Well, I've gotten a few threats, as you well know. I get those on a pretty regular basis for primary opponents. Obviously, the president made a joking remark today, but a lot of my colleagues seized upon that and said, well, you know, he's going to get a primary. You know, in the end, if I go home for doing what is right for our country and the Constitution, this is a temporary job anyways. If I go home for doing what's right, you know, I'll find something else to do, but I'll be able to rest well at night.
Well, Congressman, I think I speak for the vast majority of my audience, and we want to thank you for fighting this. I strongly oppose this, not that you need to hear that from me. And I think this will hurt the country. I think it will hurt the president. I think it will hurt the Republican Party. But more than anything else, it doesn't fix the health care problem. They're not focusing on the end result. Quality health care at an affordable price requires market capitalism, competition, less Soviet-style centralized government, less politicians and bureaucrats writing all the rules. The American people will decide what they want, more choices and so forth. This does not do that. So I want to thank you, Congressman, for fighting, and we support you strongly.
Well, I thank you, and thank you for being a voice of reason as it comes to this. Thank your listeners on behalf of the House Freedom Caucus. We're going to stand strong and hopefully get back to those market-driven principles that actually will make health care affordable again. God bless you.
All right, be well. Congressman Mark Meadows, chairman of the Freedom Caucus. Now, he and those folks are going to get blamed if this goes down. They should get credit if this goes down. The people who deserve blame are Paul Ryan, Kevin McCarthy, Steve Scalise, and the other Republican leaders. They put the president in an untenable position, and the president's now all in. All in. So if it goes down, now they're going to attack Trump. They're going to say that, see, Trump isn't effective, and so forth and so on. The Republican leadership is poisonous. Absolutely poisonous as far as I'm concerned. And they're even promoting a bill that would get killed in the Senate. Already. Not just Mike Lee, and Rand Paul and Ted Cruz. Marco Rubio has spoken out against it. Tom Cotton has spoken out against it. I mean, you're not able to hold together, 5 prominent Republican senators. So what is this? What are we doing? Well, we'll get it there and we'll work it out. You're going to work it out in the Senate with Chuck Schumer? And this issue of the parliamentarian, this is a phony fig leaf. Phony fig leaf. As I've already mentioned, the 1974 Budget Act. Ted Cruz took a very, very close look at it, as we have at Conservative Review. The President of the Senate is the Vice President of the United States. He has the power under the Budget Act of 1974 to make final parliamentarian decisions. He does. And I asked him about it when he was on the program, and he kind of did a shuffle, quite frankly. I told you before, and I'll tell you again, there are Republicans in Congress, in the House and the Senate, and perhaps some advising the President of the United States who do not want to repeal Obamacare. They want you to think they're repealing Obamacare, which is why they continue with the left-wing propaganda. This is dead. We're repealing it, when they're saving, the fundamental columns that hold it up. I'll be right back. I would suggest the Rhinos remember Eric Cantor, a distant memory, and Dave Bratt, because we're going to do that if they start picking off conservatives. Now, ladies and gentlemen, now it's time for a Levin surge. You Levinites, it's time to fight for your liberty and fight for actual, real health care. I am sorry the Republican leadership has snuck at the President of the United States, but that's not our fault. The issue here is our health care, our future, our children and our grandchildren. Call your member of Congress, the House. The Senate's not in play right now. 202-225-3121. 202-225-3121. And if they're closed, leave a polite message. Always be civil. And if they're closed, leave a polite message. If their voicemail's full, call them in the morning. This is an official Levin surge. We don't do them often, but we're going to do it now. Have you visited Blindster.com yet? Now, they're my favorite window treatment company. That's BlindsTER.com, Blindster.com. The selection of custom-made blinds, shutters, and shades is amazing. And their prices are the lowest anywhere. But what really stands out to me at Blindster.com is the customer service statement right there on their website. It says, we are passionate about the quality of our products and the satisfaction of our customers. Their commitment to you is up front and center. Owner and entrepreneur Kyle Cox and his staff have a reputation for truly caring about your happiness. I've never seen anything like it, frankly, including their fit or free guarantee. That means that even if you accidentally measure incorrectly, Kyle will remake your blinds for free. You only pay for shipping. That's it. I love entrepreneurs like Kyle who put customers first simply because it's the right thing to do. If you can use a tape measure and a screwdriver, you can install the highest quality custom shade shutters and blinds. And get this, you get a whopping 35% discount if you act now and enter my code MARK. You enter it at checkout. Go to Blindster.com, BlindsTER.com, enter promo code MARK. Blindster.com, promo code MARK. All right, we're in an official Levin surge. So all you Levinites out there who've had enough of this, You've been watching like I have. You've been analyzing like I have. And you're sick and tired of it. Now is the time to call your House member. I don't care if they're a Democrat. I don't care if they're a communist. I don't care if they're a rhino, whatever they are. Politely, civilly, let them know. Vote no on this phony Republican replacement bill. Vote no. And that's what they need to hear from you. From you. Enough with the propaganda. Enough with the self-serving statements. And I am warning the Republican establishment right now. You try to take out Meadows the way you did Huell's camp and the way you did Garrett, we're going to have a list of 10 liberal Republicans who we are going to fight to take out. Just like we took out Eric Cantor. May I add, just like we took out John Boehner. All the other hosts, they were in our dust. We mean business. I'll be right back.
He's here. Now, broadcasting from the underground command post, deep in the bowels of a hidden bunker, somewhere under the brick and steel of a nondescript building, we've once again made contact with our leader, Mark Levin.
Hello, everybody. Mark Levin here, Hour 2. Our number, 877-381-3811, 877-381-3811. Phase 2 and Phase 3, ladies and gentlemen, that's where we're going to repeal all these mandates through the regulations, you see, because we can't get it through the reconciliation process under the Budget Act of 1974, which bypasses the filibuster rule and allows for a 51-vote majority in the Senate and a simple majority in the House. So I have a question for you folks. Well, how are they going to get Phase 2 and Phase 3 passed through the Senate, regardless of what Phase 2 and Phase 3 are? Because what they're saying is that the reason they're not including these other aspects in the first round is because they will be filibustered by the Democrats. So then why do they keep talking about Phase 2 and Phase 3, which will be filibustered by the Democrats? That's number one. That's why I know that's fake. Number two, when the Vice President was on this program, a man I like very much still, when the Vice President was on this program, and I specifically asked him about the Budget Act of 1974 and the fact that he has the power as the President of the United States Senate to make final determinations under the Budget Act. He has the power anyway, but under the Budget Act specifically, to rule on, on these parliamentary issues. Not a civil servant bureaucrat, perfectly nice person, I'm sure, who's the parliamentarian. He ducked it. So I look at these two things and I say, no, they're not serious about this. Phase 2 and Phase 3. Phase 2 and Phase 3. They do not have the cross-state border purchasing power when it comes to insurance. That's not in this. When Paul Ryan spoke to me for about 20 minutes, was telling me, I said, well, where can I get whatever kind of policy? Well, the states will be able to have different policies and so forth. No, they won't. No, they won't. What about health care savings accounts, health saving accounts? Well, they're capped. And you can only purchase certain policies. Government-certified policies. Again, the policies with no cap, the policies where people up to 26 are on their parents, blah, 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 blah. In other words, policies that are going to be broke anyway from insurance companies that can't handle this, because this isn't insurance. Look, insurance is supposed to be a risk. That's what insurance is about. I have insurance on my house. Before somebody breaks in, before there's any wind damage, before there's any weather damage, before there's any fire, whatever, before there's a broken pipe and water and flooding and so forth. Most of you have insurance on your homes or your apartments. You have insurance on your automobiles and so forth. Well, Mark, we're required to have insurance on an automobile. We're required to have insurance on an automobile. Well, you're required to have insurance on an automobile, really not because of you. It's because of the other person you might hit. So they have a cause of action. So somebody pays for their damage that you have caused. This is different. Healthcare doesn't work that way. Now, as for those who have pre-existing conditions today, who did not purchase health insurance or purchased a very thin policy in the past, there are ways to address that as well as those who are truly in poverty without destroying the entire health care plan or massively ballooning up Medicaid. I've given a proposal that, just from me, a pedestrian on this, which is vouchers. 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 This top-down government-run healthcare stuff, this is something we should avoid. You know, we played a clip last night of Susan Collins being asked, do you think healthcare is a right? And she basically said, yes, I do. Well, I want to tell you what happens when healthcare is a right. This is from Hot Air yesterday, a website. VA Inspector General, suicide hotline left some veterans on hold for up to 30 minutes. The Inspector General for the Department of Veteran Affairs released a report Monday which found needed improvements to a suicide hotline for vets have not been made. The report said many vets who called the hotline were being routed to overflow call centers, and some were being placed in the queue for up to 30 minutes waiting for their call to be answered. Well, shouldn't they be thankful because they have universal, single-payer, government-run health care? That was their right. Look, they got their right. They got their health care. No, that's not right. The issue isn't whether you have health care. The issue is whether you have quality medical care. The Veterans Crisis Line, VCL, was established in 2007 and answers roughly 500,000 calls a year. The goal was to have no more than 10% of the calls routed to overflow call centers. But in fact, the rate was nearly 30% as recently as last November. But you have a right. You have a right. We talk in shibboleths. We talk in platitudes. We talk nonsense to each other. Because the low IQ left-wing media pushes these myths. Every person has a right to health care. Okay, now what? Okay, now what? Now what? What does that mean? Does that mean the minute you need health care or you think you need health care, you should get it? How's that going to work? The minute you want to see a doctor, even though there's not enough doctors, you should be able to see the doctor? How does that work? The minute you need a drug, you should be able to get a drug? How does that work? The minute you need to call somebody on the suicide hotline, how does that work? Apparently not very well. But we have a right. We have a right. Why is it, ladies and gentlemen, that market capitalism, competition, entrepreneurship, free enterprise, call it what you will, is relied on to put food on the table, clothing on our back, a roof over our heads? But when it comes to health care, it's abandoned. It's abandoned even by Paul Ryan and Kevin McCarthy and Steve Scalise. Why is it abandoned? When it works. It drives down prices. It creates more competition. Why do we take a Soviet-style model put in place by Barack Obama and the Democrats when they controlled the House and the Senate? Why do we take their model and tinker with it? Which is exactly what they've done. That's not going to get us anywhere now, is it? And all this talk, well, now we're really going to repeal it. Here's the problem. The American people aren't stupid. They're going to see what this really is, should it pass the House and the Senate. And their premiums are not going to come down. And the deductibles are not going to come down. And there won't be more choices. Then what? Republicans aren't going to win all the time. Donald Trump won't be around all the time. The Democrats win a lot too, you know. Then the American people will not have experienced in the last half a century what it's like to have a vibrant, innovative, competitive healthcare system. They will never have experienced that. Because we continue to go down the road that the left paves for us, with little detours here and there. But when you say the fundamentals of Obamacare are not going to be repealed, even though they're running around saying they are, they're not. That the fundamentals of Obamacare are not going to be repealed, they're going to be in place, then the fundamentals are in place. And the Democrats, once again, when they control the presidency in both houses of Congress, they will easily broom whatever these Republicans are doing. And the public, many of the people, your neighbors, family members, and so forth, I know we get it. They won't get it. I'll be right back.
Mark Levin.
Jeffrey Lord is a contributor to Conservative Review. I think that's really his preeminent contribution. But he also contributes to CNN, may I say, of which I'm among their favorite people, as I understand it. Jeffrey Lord, how are you, sir?
I'm fine, Great One. You are, of course, one of my favorite people.
People don't know. We go way back. Tell them the story how we first met in the Reagan administration.
Oh, my goodness. I was asked to call you when you were working for Ed Meese to recommend somebody for a job in the Justice Department. And I called you, and your response was to me, he worked for Bush. He worked for Bush. To which I said, but Mark, Bush is the Vice President of the United States. And you said, I don't care. And then you proceeded to give me my own private 10-minute radio show and said, thanks, no.
And you were you with...
Ever since.
Were you with Drew Lewis at the time, right?
Exactly.
Who was also a friend of mine. But that said, the good old days, huh? Anyway, Here's why I wanted to talk to you. We have this this spectacle going on with the Democrats in the Judiciary Committee, and you wrote an excellent piece at Conservative Review about, folks, we need to step back and look at who's hijacked what. They keep talking about how the Republicans hijacked this Supreme Court slot, which is ridiculous, but you said it's even worse with the Democrats. They hijacked this whole confirmation process. Go ahead and explain what happened.
Mark, one of the things I got to do, and I'm not a lawyer, but I took a real interest in this when I was in the Reagan White House in the political office, and I had the opportunity to work on 5 Supreme Court nominations for Rehnquist, for Chief Justice Scalia, Bork, Kennedy, and there was one other there, I think.
Ginsburg, which lasted about 4 hours.
Right. That's right. That's exactly what it was. Ginsburg that became Kennedy. And then after that, one of my best friends from college, Brooks Smith, was nominated by Bush 43 for the Third Circuit. He was a Reagan appointee. He was Chief Judge of the Western District of Pennsylvania. He was nominated very uncontroversially, so everyone supposed, for the Third Circuit. And if I learned anything, these people on the other side, they will spare no expense. If they were for A today, they will be for Z tomorrow. Their objective is to own the federal judiciary and turn it into basically an unelected political arm. And they will do anything and everything. They will call it every interest group. They have interest groups that live for these fights, that raise money off of these fights. And it doesn't make any difference who the nominee is. That my friend, the Third Circuit nominee, who, by the way, serves on there now with Donald Trump's sister, interestingly, but he was broadly acceptable to conservatives and liberals, moderates in Western Pennsylvania. And he thought, well, no problem. And I said to him, Brooks, you don't understand. I've been through this. This is what's going to happen. And that is indeed what happened. I mean, they fought these people. They fought him tooth and nail. And every last interest group came out. They said he was anti-woman, he was anti-this, he was anti-that. I mean, all the typical stick we hear. So my point here in this piece in Conservative Review is to know that, number one, these people have stolen the process. This used to be a very, very dignified process. People used to pass through these things for the Supreme Court and otherwise with unanimous recommendations decades ago. And now they're in a circus, and it's not only, the really bad thing is it's not only the Supreme Court nominees, but as Brooks Smith and Jeff Sessions could testify from their nominations to the court and so many others, this is now spread like a cancer down through the ranks for the appeals court nominees and the district court nominees. It's really bad, and they have hijacked this thing from start to finish. So, correspondingly, that means people on our side have really got to stand up and be counted here, and that means all of these senators.
Mm-hmm. Now, do you agree with me that given we have these kamikaze Democrats now, and that's what they are,
yes.
That look, if we have to suspend the filibuster rule to enforce our constitutional system, it's an unfortunate thing, but in fact, the Constitution trumps the filibuster rule. Do you agree with me on that?
I absolutely agree with you. Absolutely. I mean, I remember, I wasn't involved in it, but what was his name? Miguel Estrada. And
right.
I mean, they went after that guy tooth and nail. And when the thing that really got me is when there were some leaks of their internal memos. They said they couldn't support him because he was quote unquote Hispanic and therefore dangerous.
I have some of those memos in the back of my book, Men in Black. Believe it or not, and they wanted to prevent him. You're right, from being the first Hispanic on the Supreme Court.
That is exactly right. So I mean, we you know. God bless the filibuster, but goodbye. I mean, this was their decision to do this. And I felt the minute I saw them do this that there was going to come a day when they would regret it. Well, that day should be here.
And Gorsuch, you know, when you go over his opinions, they're in the four corners of rational, constitutional, conservative opinions. His writing is very cogent. Nothing provocative, but really what they're trying to do and what you commented on, I commented on the other day is this. They want to enshrine their ideology in the rule of law. That's why they always talk about precedent and not the Constitution. In fact, Jeffrey Lord, if you heard any of this today, and I'm sure you did, they're trashing the Constitution. We need a living and breathing Constitution. They are trashing the Constitution today, were they not?
Well, that's absolutely right. And I do believe I heard him say at some point that if anything had to, I'm paraphrasing here, but if anything had to do with politics, he's not interested. He's interested in the Constitution. Man, that is just a red flag to these people. Mm-hmm. I mean, they want politics on this bench. I mean, this living, breathing nonsense means whatever the latest judge of the moment can decide in their own personal situation fits. This is not about the Constitution at all. They are about trashing the Constitution. You were exactly right. And this is so dangerous for this country. I mean, when you get to the point where the Constitution is just non-existent, I mean, then it just becomes a free-for-all and the most powerful person rules, et cetera, et cetera. This is very dangerous.
And, you know, even as outrageous as this living, breathing stuff is, you know, the people are living and breathing. The government is not supposed to be as big as it can be. The people are supposed to be as big as they can be. So I say that even when it comes to living and breathing, if we had a nominee that went up there and said, yeah, I believe in a living and breathing Constitution that changes with the times, and I'm a conservative, and I really believe that we ought to change things to accommodate my viewpoint, you think that person would be confirmed?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not.
So even the activism only goes one way.
That's right. And you have done such a great job in your books, and I think it was in Men in Black where you talked at length about Dred Scott. Yes. And writing that into the Constitution. I mean, this kind of stuff is so appalling when you realize that whether the subject was slavery or abortion, they made this stuff up on the fly and put it in there because they favored it. I mean, that is just unbelievable.
That's judicial activism. Here. That's a living and breathing Constitution.
That is exactly right. And you know, this began, I think, at least for me, and you're the historian on this, but I mean, I remember this as a child with the Warren Court. And, you know, I'm a kid now, you know, I didn't quite get the deal here, but I get it now. And this has just been taken to its logical extreme. It
actually began in earnest when Franklin Roosevelt tried to pack the court. And intimidated the sitting justices, eventually replaced them all. And the Warren Court absolutely went nuts. Jeffrey Lord, go ahead. 15 seconds.
I remember vividly saying goodbye to school prayer the last day of 6th grade because of the Warren Court.
All right, my friend. Be well. Take care of yourself. We'll be right back. Can you believe Barack Obama named a mountain in Alaska after me? Oh, my goodness. Well, If you see me on my way to work or a meeting, chances are I'm impeccably attired in one of my many CT shirts. They are the best shirts in my closet. Now, people judge us by the clothes that we wear. So if you show up to work, a meeting, or a date in a wrinkled, out-of-style shirt that doesn't fit, well, that's how you're going to be judged. It's time to step up your game. So I got you a special CT shirts deal. CT shirts are British-styled, using the softest, most exquisite fabrics ever. Work or casual, tie or no tie, tucked or untucked, when you're wearing a CT shirt, you look great, and you know it. So here's the deal. One CT shirt normally costs $100, but right now you'll get three shirts for just $99. 3 shirts for just $99. That's 60% off. And CT shirts come with free delivery, a 6-month quality guarantee, and free returns. Did you hear that? Free delivery, 6-month quality guarantee, and free returns. That's how sure they are that you're going to love their shirts. Me too. If you hurry, $99 gets you 3 amazing CT shirts. This is what you do. Go to ctshirts.com/Levin. ctshirts.com/Levin. That's ctshirts.com/Levin, Levin. It's that simple. And you're going to love these shirts too. I know you are. Let's get to a few other issues here. Well, you know what? I haven't had any callers, have I, Mr. Producer? We're going to get to a couple more issues next hour. I want to get to this hearing again, briefly, that took place yesterday. Well, let me start it this way. I was watching the end of the hearing during my radio prep, and I heard this congresswoman from outside of Albany, New York. And she's a freshman. And she was on to something. And she was quite good. Other people apparently picked this up too. I said to Mr. Producer, I said, who is that? And I want you to hear, you know what, Mr. Producer, let's go ahead and pull that clip. Let's jump into this right now. I want you to listen carefully, ladies and gentlemen, to Cut 17. Cut 17. Go ahead.
Broadly, when the FBI has any open counterintelligence investigation, what are the typical protocols or procedures for notifying the DNI, the White House, and senior congressional leadership?
Stop. That means the Director of National Intelligence, the White House, senior congressional leaders on the intel committees, okay? Go ahead.
It's a practice of a quarterly briefing on sensitive cases to the chair and ranking of the House and Senate Intelligence Committees. And the reason I hesitate
quarterly briefing means, obviously, every 3 months. Every 3 months. Go ahead.
Thanks to feedback we've gotten, we're trying to make it better. And that involves a briefing of the Department of Justice, I believe the DNI, and the some portion of the National Security Council at the White House.
So if that's
so stop right there. Some portion of the National Security Council at the White House. Now, don't confuse National Security Council with National Security Agency. They're different and they're distinct. The National Security Council advises the president. Some portion of the National Security Council, now you have to assume the highest levels. They're not going to, talk to the janitor or to a secretary or whatever. You have to assume they're going to talk to the National Security Advisor, who runs the National Security Council, who serves the president, or maybe the deputy director of the National Security Council, Ben Rose. Right? Some portion of it. Very odd language, but we get it. Go ahead.
Them before Congress is briefed.
So it's quarterly for all 3.
So stop. He briefs them before Congress is briefed. The Justice Department, the Director of National Intelligence, and some portion of the National Security Council. That is, the White House. It's the White House. Go ahead.
Leadership, the White House, and the DNI?
I think that's right. Now, that's by practice, not by rule or by written policy, which is why, thanks to the chair and ranking giving us feedback, we're trying to tweak it in certain ways.
So since in your opening statement you confirmed that there is a counterintelligence investigation currently open, and you also referenced that it started in July, when did you notify the DNI, the White House, or senior congressional leadership?
It's a good question. Congressional leadership, sometime recently, they were briefed on the nature of the investigation in some detail, as I said. Obviously, the Department of Justice has been aware of it all along. The DNI, I don't know what the DNI's knowledge of it was, because we didn't have a DNI until Mr. Coates took office. And
Stop. Of course, that's false. We had a DNI before Mr. Coates took office. His name was Clapper, James Clapper. Remember him? Who said there was absolutely no collusion with the Russians. There's no FISA, no nothing. And remember, Chuck Todd on Meet the Depressed held this up. That's a revelation. That's a revelation. So, Mark, all your talk about these investigations, these police tactics, all the rest of this, raising questions, your curiosity, you're just a conspiracy kook. Right? Let's go. Go ahead.
His first morning in office.
So just to drill down on this, if the open investigation began in July and the briefing of congressional leadership only occurred recently, why was there no notification prior to the recent...
Let's stop. So he has said that he notifies the Justice Department, which you have to do. As an old Justice Department Chief of Staff, the FBI reports to the Attorney General of the United States. So it's an independent entity within the Department of Justice. It's called Main Justice, and yes, they meet and they talk. The Attorney General and the Director of the FBI. And he says we give the information to the Director of National Intelligence, although it doesn't appear that he did. But they give it to him before they give it to the leadership of Congress, these intelligence committees. And he said again that, or I'm repeating, that they give the information to the National Security Council, certain parts of it, you assume the head of it, who reports directly to the President of the United States. It took him 8 months. He said he does this quarterly, right? Quarterly, on sensitive investigations. It wasn't 3 months. It wasn't 6 months. It was 8 months until he waited to tell the leadership of the intelligence committees in the Senate and the House, the FBI director. It wasn't 3 months. It wasn't quarterly. So here we are in the middle of a presidential campaign. The FBI is investigating, has launched a counterintelligence investigation of the Trump campaign as it relates to Russia, whether there was any influence. There are leaks all over the media, whether there were two attempts to get applications for warrants with the FISA court. The first one in the summer, around the time that he says they began an investigation, a counterintelligence investigation, and then one in October. And by the way, this suggests to me, I don't know, I'm surmising, this suggests to me that they did go to the FISA court because they're running a counterintelligence investigation. And they want to create the proper constitutional and legal predicates on which to build their investigation. And it's an ongoing investigation. This also, as a footnote, suggests to me that all the information they're gathering isn't by happenstance or chance or coincidence when they're tapping or eavesdropping or some other form of surveillance on the Russian ambassador. That may have been one aspect of it, the beginning of it, whatever it was, and then they get information about, or they hear Michael Flynn. But they're affirmatively undertaking an investigation. I don't think they're sitting around hoping they hear stuff if they're tapping some foreign agent's phone or whatever. And it amazes me that you have an ongoing investigation for 8 months until he reveals it to the intelligence chiefs in the various committees, the heads of the committees. While these leaks are going on to the New York Times, while these leaks are going on to the Washington Post and these other outlets about aspects accurate or inaccurate aspects of an ongoing investigation. And the Obama White House is drawn in by the New York Times, talking about how intelligence information did in fact go to White House officials, and White House officials were spreading it around the government to ensure that it wasn't destroyed or lost when Trump became president. Now, I would tell Jake Tapper and all the rest of them, I'm not glomming together anything. These are facts. They're on the table. You should be a little bit more curious than you are. Anyway, let's continue. Go ahead.
This month.
I think our decision was it was a matter of such sensitivity that we wouldn't include it in the quarterly briefings.
So when you state our decision, is that your decision? Is that usually your decision?
So let's stop there. First of all, so sensitive was the fact of this ongoing counterintelligence investigation of the Trump campaign and the Russians related to it, that the FBI director didn't report it in the quarterly. Remember, there should have been 2 quarterly reports at that point, because this went on for 8 months, right, from July until recently. That he didn't report it to the congressional heads of the 2 intelligence committees, one in the House, one in the Senate, at all, because it was too sensitive. Too sensitive. Now, who the hell runs this government? There's 3 branches of government. The FBI is not a branch of government. The FBI works within the executive branch. It gets its funding from Congress. It's authorized by Congress. In other words, Congress gave it its existence. Congress birthed it. But it was so sensitive that he wouldn't tell the intelligence chairman and ranking members in the House and the Senate. Go ahead.
Briefed in those quarterly updates?
No, it's usually the decision of the head of our counterintelligence division.
And just
so now the head of the counterintelligence division decides if somebody's going to be briefed, right? That's what he just said? So here he washes his hands of responsibility and accountability, the FBI director, because he thinks another shoe's going to drop during the course of her questioning, which is very, very good questioning. Go ahead.
To get the detailed on the record, why was the decision made not to brief senior congressional leadership until recently, when the investigation had been open since July, a very serious investigation? Why was that decision made to wait months?
Because of the sensitivity of the matter.
And that's that. Now, Trey Gowdy's sitting next to her. You got former prosecutors. You got lawyers on this committee. I explore this in depth on Levin TV, by the way, but let me just say this. The next question should have been, you said you brief on sensitive matters some element, some people in the National Security Council, which reports to the president. Tell me, did you brief anybody at the White House, including on the National Security Council, about your counterintelligence investigation of the Trump campaign and the Russians? It was never asked. It was never asked. Tell me, did you brief Loretta Lynch specifically about it, and might she have briefed the president or somebody, the White House counsel? He was never asked. Maybe our intrepid investigative reporters, Brian Ross, maybe he'll wake up from his stupor. Maybe Brian Stelzer will wake up from his talking points from the DNC. Maybe Jake Tapper. Maybe somebody will go to the FBI director and ask him. I'll be right back.
Mark Levin.
The congresswoman's name from New York is Elise Stefanik. By the way, she's fairly liberal as a Republican. But she was right on here. Just 1 or 2 more questions and we would have been there. Or close to there. And it's just dropped. It's just dropped. And, of course, the media don't give a damn. The Praetorian Guard has circled the wagons. Now, they circle it here, they circle it there. They're not exactly sure what they're protecting or not protecting. but the wagons are circling. If you think about how moronic they are, it is kind of funny. You know, another 32 million email accounts have been breached. This on top of the previously announced 1.5 billion in recent years. This time, hackers used forged cookies to gain access to protected accounts. Stolen information was posted for sale on the dark web last August for $300,000. The Internet company has since removed the cookies from their system. Now, to avoid identity theft, reset your email accounts with strong passwords. Identity theft is America's fastest-growing crime. It happens when thieves use your information to pretend that they're you. They can buy things on your credit or liquidate bank accounts. LifeLock scans hundreds of millions of transactions every single second. And if they detect your information, they send you an alert. If you have a problem, a U.S.-based agent will work to fix it. Free credit monitoring only alerts you to changes in credit. No one can prevent all identity theft or monitor all transactions at all businesses. But LifeLock is absolutely the best identity theft protection available anywhere. Here's what you do. I've done this. My parents have done this. Go to LifeLock.com, LifeLock.com, use promo code Levin, and you'll get 10% off your LifeLock membership. Or call 1-800-LifeLock, 1-800-LifeLock, use promo code Levin, get 10% off your LifeLock membership. So 2 ways to get it. LifeLock.com or call 1-800-LifeLock. In both cases, use promo code Levin so you get 10% off. Visit LifeLock.com and save now 10%. All right. Let's take a call. We have a lot more to get to today, and we have hammered away. Carol, Las Vegas, Nevada, the great KDWN, KDWN, go.
Hey, Mark. How you doing?
All right, thank you.
I watched that hearing yesterday. I actually watched most of it twice, and I've heard things the second time that I didn't really hear the first time. But the one thing that I was watching that really upset me yesterday, because that congresswoman you were talking about, I'm sorry, I don't remember her name.
Stefanik, I believe, is her name.
Yeah,
she's a rookie.
She was great. She did ask him, when she asked him when he notified the DOJ, the congressional leadership, the DNI, and the White House, she said, he only answered the leadership recently, the DOJ knew, the DNI.
I know, but you can't let him get away with that.
And
I'm not criticizing you. You can't let him get away with that. You got to press the case.
Earlier in the hearing,
you're not listening to a word I just said.
I'm sorry.
I said you cannot let what is a hostile witness get away with that.
Right.
Did you inform anybody at the White House? When did you inform them? And who did you inform? That's how you close the circle.
And he also was asked if Ben Rhodes was notified or had access to the
Well, Gowdy went through a number of names, and he said he isn't going to comment specifically. But I feel she had him on the run. She really did. And by digging in and answering the question specifically like that, and him not answering it, that would have been a big deal, I think. But anyway, thank you. We'll be right back.
He's here. Now, broadcasting from the underground command post, deep in the bowels of a hidden bunker, somewhere under the brick and steel of a nondescript building, we've once again made contact with our leader, Mark Levin.
Hello, everybody. Mark Levin here. Our number, 877-381-3811, 877-381-3811. I want you to hear from the leading kamikaze Democrat, Charles Chucky Schmucky Schumer, a snake oil salesman, a detestable person. I want you to hear from this reckless miscreant today on the floor of the Senate. Cut one, go.
Before I move on to another topic, I'd like to point out that it is the height of irony that Republicans held this Supreme Court seat open for nearly a calendar year while President Obama was in office.
Stop. Moron. Moron. We have a lot of you on tape back then, including Joe Biden, the dumbest man to ever be vice president. Near the final months of the George W. Bush presidency, not even the final months, I think it was within 18 months or 12 months, whatever it was, warning Bush, should there be a vacancy on the court, don't send any nominee to the Senate because they won't support it. Chuck Schumer is a pathological liar. He's a congenital liar. He just can't help it. Go ahead.
To fill the seat for a president whose campaign is under investigation by the FBI.
I see. So, according to Chuck Schumer, and I am certain the statist media will be reporting what a conspiracy nut he is, Trump is trying to quickly fill the Supreme Court seat with Gorsuch to help him because he's under active investigation. His campaign is, according to the FBI director. Now, the idea is so absurd, I'd say it's laughable, but watch how the media will not point out what a conspiracy left-wing kook he is. Certainly not CNN or Brian Ross or the Morning Schmo on MSLSD. Go ahead.
Even Rep. Nunes, the Republican chairman of the House Intelligence Committee.
All right, stop. It's Representative Nunes, and it's the House Intelligence Committee, you Nimrod. Go ahead.
Confirmed yesterday by FBI Director Comey puts a big gray cloud over this administration.
Stop. And you know what other administration it puts a big gray cloud over? The Obama administration. How does the Obama administration come away from this completely untouched? When it's the Obama administration that runs the FBI, the NSA, the Justice Department, and all the rest of the alphabet soup. How is it that the guy who puts out the tweet is in the crosshairs and the instrumentalities of the government under the executive branch, the President of the United States, you're not even allowed to mention it if you do. Hey, can you prove it? Can you prove it? What a bunch of schmoes. Go ahead.
You can bet if the shoe were on the other foot and a Democratic president was under investigation by the FBI, the Republicans would be howling at the moon about filling a Supreme Court seat in such circumstances.
What is he rambling on about? What is he rambling on about? Go ahead.
After all, they stopped the president who wasn't under investigation from filling a seat with nearly a year.
So in other words, what the Republicans should have done is when Barack Obama decided to nominate somebody to fill Scalia's seat, they should have said, let's do it, guys. In the middle of an election, let's do it. Even though Joe Biden and John Kerry and all the rest of them, and Barack Obama said, George W., you better not pull anything like that. Let's just do it for the team, folks. Let's do it for Obama. Let's replace Scalia with a liberal. Let's forget about everything the Democrats did and the Democrats said. Go ahead.
Presidency. It is unseemly to be moving forward so fast on confirming a Supreme Court justice with a lifetime appointment while this big gray cloud of an FBI investigation hangs over the presidency.
There's the schmucky's latest genius idea. So let's stop until James Comey's done. But again, I would argue the gray cloud hangs over the prior presidency, too. And I'm not backing off, folks. I'm not going to back off at all on this. Not going to happen. Patrick Leahy, cut 5 at the confirmation hearing today. Go.
In contrast to past nominees like John Roberts...
Oh, good. A little more oxygen, please. Go ahead.
Judicial philosophy was not clearly articulated when he appeared before this committee.
No offense, but does anybody think this guy should be a senator? Let's be honest. Let's be honest. He can't tie his shoes. He can't brush his teeth as he shuffles around. Been in the Senate forever. Does anybody believe this man should be a senator? That I want to know the truth. Start from the top. Go ahead.
In contrast to past nominees like John Roberts, whose judicial philosophy was not clearly articulated.
Hold on now, Mr. Producer. Didn't you hear him just call John Roberts a Jew? Did you hear that? I'm pretty sure I heard that. Can you start from the top again, please? Go ahead.
In contrast to past nominees like John Roberts, whose judicial...
Yes, there it is. I caught him, didn't I, Mr. Producer? All right, let's continue, shall we? Go ahead.
In contrast to past nominees like John Roberts, whose judicial philosophy was not clearly articulated when he appeared before this committee, Judge Gorsuch appears to have a comprehensive originalist philosophy.
Yes.
The approach taken by jurors such as Justice Scalia, Justice Thomas, former Judge Bork.
An originalist view is nothing more, ladies and gentlemen, than a human being who wears a black robe trying to discern what was intended by the language in the Constitution. If it's not understandable by the text or at a surface level, you try and discern it by what the people who wrote it meant, by what the people who ratified it meant. That's the terms and conditions of our government. And I know the left hates it. They hate the Constitution. If this hearing has taught us anything for the last 48 hours, it's that the Democrats despise the Constitution and American history. Now, we already knew it, but each one of them is on record. One after the other after the other. Go ahead.
Some popularity within conservative circles. Originalism, I believe, remains outside the mainstream of modern constitutional jurisprudence.
Oh, modern constitutional jurisprudence. Yes, yes. In other words, liberal activism. Go ahead.
It's been 25 years since an originalist has been nominated to the Supreme Court. Given what we've seen from Justice Scalia and Justice Thomas and Judge Gorsuch's own record, I worry that it goes beyond being a philosophy and it becomes an agenda.
Oh, here we go.
We know that conservative groups have vetted Judge Gorsuch.
There is an agenda, you nitwit. And the agenda is to try and follow the Constitution. When you take an oath to uphold the Constitution, as you have 40 or 50 times as a senator, I guess. Sounds like he's about 412 years old. You take an oath to uphold the Constitution, not the living and breathing Constitution, not the modern interpretation of the Constitution. The Constitution, you idiot! Go ahead.
Millionaires who fund them have a clear agenda. One that's anti-choice, anti-environment, pro-corporate. And these groups are obviously confident that Judge Gorsuch shares their agenda.
I'm just I'm just stunned when I listen to this guy. He's been on the Judiciary Committee. I think he was first elected, give or take, 1974, 1976. So he has spent, I think he was elected when he was 36 to the United States Senate. So he's well up there. He has spent virtually his entire career as a senator on the Judiciary Committee. And he's still a knucklehead. He's still a knucklehead. To have a man sit in the United States Senate for almost half a century who is repulsed by our governing document, who demands that people who become judges adopt his political philosophy. It's tyranny. The guy's a tyrant. That's what he is. And why do all liberals talk like this? Why do they all talk like this? That's the census. Yes, I think there are little concerns here. Yes, why do they all talk like Daffy Duck? I'll be right back.
Mark Levin.
You know, it just so happens, ladies and gentlemen, two of my dearest buddies have written great books. One a fiction, one a nonfiction. John Hybush's book on the Shroud, And we had John on last week, and I strongly encourage you to get it. And now my buddy Craig Shirley, who is an expert, a historian on Ronald Reagan. Craig Shirley, how are you, my buddy?
Hi, Mark. How are you?
I'm doing great. Well, you've written quite a book here, Reagan Rising, the Decisive Years, 1976 through 80. I lived these years.
I know.
Tell us why 76 through 80. Why did you focus on this 4 or 5 year period?
Well, it's before Reagan's third run for president. He left 76. There were a lot of doubts, most especially from the Eastern elites, the liberals, and the establishment of the Republican Party, the national media. Newsweek wrote a story after he lost in 76 to Gerald Ford, and the headline was "Into the Sunset." And everybody said, okay, Reagan, 65, his career was over. He tried twice, 2 bites at the apple, once in 68, lost to Nixon, once in 76, lost to Gerald Ford. And he's a figure of the past. We need to focus on the future now. Everybody had written off his political career, that it was over, and that he was a flash in the pan. And really, it was only Reagan himself and Mrs. Reagan who really had, the grit and the determination to run when even a lot of his old campaign aides had thought, okay, he's done. We need to move on to another candidate for 1980. So it really is about the fundamental blocking and tackling that went into what he had to go through, again, as struggling. To get the presidential nomination in 1980, because everybody had written his career off. Everybody was turning to George Bush, Howard Baker, Bob Dole, and that they were younger, they were more moderate, they were more acceptable to the establishment wing elements of the Republican Party. They were more acceptable to the media establishment, and so it really is about what he had to go through. To find the doubts, overcoming the doubters to gain the nomination in 1980, and what he took advantage of too, because there was, as you remember, we were both there, we were both kids, but there was a conservative enlightenment coming into full flower. Is that the Heritage Foundation was created, and the Cato, and so many conservative organizations and institutions were coming into their own in the 1970s, and there was a lot of Prop 13, the Soviet
conservative legal groups began to pop up.
Groups, that's right, conservative legal groups. Is that there was tax cuts, there was the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan, there was a lot of pro-family groups, pro-life groups. There was a lot of conservative, there was a lot of creative revolt in the land against the Republican establishment and against the media, political establishment.
Reagan attracted, here he was at the time, in 1980, the oldest candidate, right? Mm-hmm. And he attracted an awful lot of young supporters, including me and a whole bunch of us in Pennsylvania and so forth, didn't he?
In 1980, he received a majority of the American vote, of the overall vote, but he received something on the order of 59% of the under 30 vote. He always drew more heavily among under 30 voters than he did among any other group. When he left office, his approval rating was 69%, but among voters under 30, it was something like 75, 78%. He always, in 84, he got something like 75% of the under 30 vote, where he got it, he got 65% of the under 30 vote. He got 59% of the overall vote. So he always, it's interesting because the oldest man ever elected president of the United States drew his greatest support from voters under 30.
And I might add, one of the most conservative.
Yes.
And so this argument that young people aren't attracted to conservatism, I think young people are attracted to liberty if it's explained to them, right?
And that's what Reagan did. You're exactly right. He talked about the future. He talked about opportunity. He talked about prosperity. He talked about limitless horizons. He talked about everything that a young person wants to hear about their own future. And of course, Carter at the time, you know, had he was his own Baptist outlook combined with the atmospherics of the time. You know, he was reading like The Culture of Narcissism by Christopher Lasch about a dystopic future. And so he's talking about scarcity and sacrifice and a future of limited horizons, exactly what a young person doesn't want to hear. And so he throws away, because the Democratic Party had essentially been the party of the future from 1932, you know, FDR, you know, happy days are here again, through John Kennedy, let's get this country moving again, right up until 1976. And then Carter throws it away, and Reagan says, okay, you don't want to be the party of the future, then I will be. And so Reagan, this is part also of how his message, he doesn't change it, but he sharpens it. So he talks more about, instead of, the benefits of tax cuts, the benefits of freedom, the benefits of pro-life, all these things that the Democrats had once talked about, now Reagan is talking about. So
now Reagan, in addition to young people, we talk about Democrats who voted for Trump. An enormous number of blue-collar Democrats voted for Ronald Reagan. Why is that?
Sure. Yeah, he got.
I just want the audience to know we have 1 minute now, but we're doing 2 segments with Craig. Go ahead.
In Pennsylvania in 1980, he got something like 45% of the Democratic vote. Overall, in 1980, he got 35% of Democratic voters nationally. You know,
has any Republican done that since?
No, nobody's come even close.
Not even close, right? Craig Shirley, this is fascinating to me. I hope it is to you folks. He's like the Rain Man when it comes to this stuff. We'll be right back with Craig Shirley, his brand new book today, Reagan Rising, The Decisive Years, 1976 to 1980. We'll be right back with Craig Shirley.
381-3811.
Craig Shirley, with his great book on Reagan Rising, The Decisive Years, 1976 to 1980. Why does any of this matter, Craig Shirley? Why, when people say, okay, already, we have Reagan, that's fine, now let's move on. What do you say to people who say that?
Well, I enjoy that question, Mark, because it allows me to answer is that we're now into studying Reagan in the way that we study Franklin Roosevelt or other great presidents. Dumas Malone devoted a lifetime to chronicling the life and times of Thomas Jefferson. Robert Caro has devoted a lifetime to chronicling the life and times of Lyndon Johnson. James McGregor Burns did with Franklin Roosevelt. And there are, and I'm glad to say that there are a number of good historians who have written about many different aspects of Ronald Reagan's life because it deserves study. You know, we're beyond just comparing him to every president since Reagan has compared himself to Reagan, which is a great compliment to Ronald Reagan, but also kind of takes away from just the study of him just for the sake of studying him, because he is such a fascinating figure of history and he's such an important figure in American history. But now he belongs to the ages, so that it's important to study every aspect of his life because the study of is simply important of American history, just as we study Abraham Lincoln.
Don't you find it odd that sometimes it's conservatives or pseudo-conservatives who make this point, like we're supposed to get over Reagan? Why would we get over the most successful, the most popular Republican president in our lifetimes? I've never understood that.
Because those are people who say that with an agenda, because they never liked Reagan, they never liked conservatism, they never liked him, they never liked his presidency. Mostly, I hear that mostly from Bushies, and you know as well as I do, there's a vast amount of jealousy on the part of the Bushies over the years toward Ronald Reagan. Everybody knows that there was animosity between the two men, between the two families.
But there wouldn't have been a Bush presidency, let alone a George W. Bush presidency, but for Ronald Reagan.
For Ronald Reagan, picking George Bush at the convention in Detroit in 1980, and Mrs. Reagan never wanted George Bush for the presidency. Of course, she wanted, our old friend Paul Laxalt, which would have made some sense. I mean, he's a great American. But I always thought that there were other candidates who probably made a little bit more sense, Jack Kemp and others. But they did pick Bush. They did.
But they got along, right? Reagan and Bush.
Oh, sure.
Quite well.
Yeah. But Bush in 8 years never. Reagan never had to look over his shoulder. Bush was a good vice president. He defended the Reagan legacy. Is that he himself has always been loyal to Ronald Reagan. He gave a marvelous speech at the Reagan funeral. But people around Bush, the Gergens of the world and others, the Sununu's of the world, have never gotten right with the Reagan presidency. So they're the ones who have always kind of denigrated his legacy and tried to demean it in some way.
What was different in 1980 than 1976? And by the way, every time Reagan ran, the establishment tried to stop him.
Yes.
But what was different this time?
Well, first of all, Reagan was different. Most men reach a point in their lives in their 30s and 40s where they adopt a settled view of the world, and that becomes their view for the rest of their lives. Reagan was not static. Reagan was dynamic. He was constantly changing. So, the Reagan of 64, he gives a brilliant speech in defense of Barry Goldwater, but he's often angry in that speech. He's angry at the anti-war protesters. He's angry at the Vietnam War. He's angry at the political establishment. He's angry at the attacks on Barry Goldwater. By 1980, he's less of an beginner and more of a positive force for the benefits of conservatism and making the intellectual case for individual freedom, rights, and dignity. So you look at his commentaries, and you look at his speeches, and you look at his op-eds. First of all, he was ubiquitous. He was everywhere. He gave major speeches. He was leading the charge against the Panama Canal treaties. He was campaigning on Prop 13. He was campaigning for candidates all over the country in 1978. He's 67 years old, but he's acting like a man who's 37 years old. He's constantly in motion. And I think he's more seasoned by 1980. He hasn't slowed down, but he's become more reflective, and his message is sharpened, and it's more about, as I said before, it's about the future, it's about opportunity, it's about individual rights, dignity, the spiritual human being. He's quoting, Cicero and Emerson and the founders and Montesquieu. All of his speeches were laced with intellectual prose and intellectual humor, and he could paint a verbal picture unlike any politician of his time.
And 1980, yet with all that,
yes,
he rolls into New Hampshire, and the whole election could be settled right there.
Right. Well, the famous, of course, you're referring to the Nashua debate. That's right. He loses Iowa in a shocking upset to George Bush, and Tom Pettit went on NBC News that night, the night of the Iowa caucuses, and he says, "We have just witnessed the political funeral of Ronald Reagan." And he was not alone, is that everybody in the national media said, okay, Reagan's lost Iowa, his career is over, he's finished. This was his last chance at the brass ring. He blew it. Iowa, of course, was his backyard. He'd been a radio broadcaster,
right,
there in Des Moines for many years, and here's George Bush, who's essentially an interloper, a Texan, who just out-campaigns Reagan in Iowa. Reagan, of course, his campaign managers are holding him back. Reagan's perfectly happy to go out and campaign hither and yon and meet farmers and talk to anybody and everybody who will listen. But his manager's saying, no, you gotta be above the fray. You're the de facto nominee. You can't get into the milieu with everybody else. And so he takes their advice, and of course loses Iowa in a historic upset, one that almost drove him out of the race for the third time. But he just tells his managers after that, he said, look, I'm going to New Hampshire. I'm going to campaign the way I like to campaign. and that was it. And in the last 2 weeks, he was campaigning in New Hampshire 12 days out of the last 14 days. The reporters on the campaign bus, the Reagan campaign bus, who most of whom were half Reagan's age, hung up a sign in the bus that said, "Free the Reagan 44." They were exhausted at the pace Reagan was setting, and of course,
but he was still behind there.
Oh yeah, he was still behind. Dick Worthman, his pollster, had him behind. Had him he went right through the floor after losing Iowa, and George Bush surged in the lead in New Hampshire and pretty much held on to that lead until just before the national debate, and then the floor fell out from George Bush.
And remind everybody what happened at that debate.
Well, it was a two-man debate, and Howard Baker and Bob Dole and John Anderson and Phil Crane and the others John Connolly were excluded, even though it was a violation of the federal election laws at the time. So Reagan says, "Look, I want this one-on-one debate, so I will pay for it myself." And he went to Bush's campaign and says, "Look, let's split the cost." And Bush said no. So it was sponsored by the Nashua Telegraph. It was a Nashua high school in New Hampshire. Reagan paid the bill, and at the last minute, Reagan decided he wanted to let the other candidates in because they had appealed to him. They'd gone to Reagan and said, "This is unfair, that you guys are doing this by yourself, you're excluding us." So that really made an impact on Reagan because he'd remembered the unfairness that Gerald Ford's campaign had waged against him in '76, and he was really moved by their argument. So he goes to live on the studio audience there and live on national television. He appeals to the debate moderator, John Breen, from the Nashua Telegraph, to allow the debate to include the other four candidates. And Breen repeatedly says no, 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 and then finally he tells the technician to turn off Reagan's microphone, which allowed him to give his historic response. He yells in the microphone, "I am paying for this microphone, Mr. Green." And this just brought peals of laughter and applause.
And he calls him Mr. Green, even though his name's Mr. Breen.
Yeah, but you know what is that?
It's hilarious.
I dealt with that. Breen was lucky Reagan called him something far worse.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and that was beside the point. Is that, and of course, the whole time there, Bush is just sitting there, with his granny glasses on, frozen like a cigar store Indian.
Because he thought, no doubt, that the Reagan campaign and so forth was looking horrible there and was making a mistake, when in fact, he looked foolish sitting over there while Reagan took control.
Exactly. Reagan took control, and that's the first time people saw, I think, Reagan in a different light, somebody who was strong and decisive, and a contrast with George Bush and a contrast with Jimmy Carter. Jimmy Carter by that time was, weak and flaccid. There were hostages in Iran. Inflation was out of control. Interest rates were out of control. People were saying the presidency was too big for one man, and so here's this one man who steps forward and takes control of his own destiny, and by saying, "I am paying for this microphone, Mr. Green," and this really had a dramatic effect, not only on the New Hampshire primary, which Reagan won hugely as a result. The bottom just fell out from underneath Bush, but also helped propel him to the nomination, but also gave the American people something to look at Reagan in a different light and see a strong and decisive individual, which they'd been missing not only with Jimmy Carter but also with Gerald Ford and Richard Nixon, especially in his second term where he was so crippled with Watergate. So it was something new on the political scene, and people liked what they saw.
This is an outstanding book. 2 segments doesn't do it justice. Reagan Rising, the decisive years 1976 to 1980. Craig Shirley and I could go on week after week after week like this, but you don't need us to do this. You can read his book. You can get it on Amazon.com, any major bookstore. You can get it on my social sites. We have it up there now. Reagan Rising, the decisive years 1976 to 1980. The best nonfiction book out there right now. Congratulations again, my friend, and do great and be well.
You too, Mark. Thank you very, very much. Thank you so much.
All right. Well, God bless you. Tell you about Levin TV. Is it time for Levin TV, Mr. Producer? I wanted to take a minute to say a big thanks to you folks and for supporting Levin TV and CRTV. We recently celebrated our one-year anniversary of the show. We couldn't do this without you. This is true democratic, little d, democratic TV. If you haven't checked out Levin TV, we're offering you on my radio audience, a free 7-day trial. So you can try CRTV, that's the network, Conservative Review TV, before you subscribe. If you're a Levin TV subscriber, you started to see why a network like CRTV is so very important. We really are the only ones out there bringing you the truth. We don't have to bring liberals on to prove to you that conservatism, liberty, national security, faith, and family, well, those are the truth. Those are the truth. And we discuss a lot of things. Recently, you've seen that I've been battling it out with the media over Russia and Trump. I'm no fan of Russia, and I'm no special pleader for Trump. But what's fair is fair. You understand the health care plan because we've gone through it piece by piece by piece, and my objections and why I think it's a disaster. If you still haven't signed up for CRTV, you shouldn't wait any longer. Start your free 7-day trial right now. Not only Levin TV, you'll see Michelle Malkin and Steve Crowder and Steve Dace, bringing on one of my buddies, I'm not allowed to say yet, who's terrific too, on all these wonderful platforms. You'll get access to every episode of every show with no long-term commitment. So check it out. Just try it out. Give us a call, 844-LEVIN-TV, that's 844-LEVIN-TV, or go to crtv.com. 844-LEVIN-TV. They're there right now to take your call. Start your free 7-day trial right now.
Mark Levin.
I want to spend a minute on why Hillsdale College is relevant to your life. Even if you don't have a family member of college age, Hillsdale helps all of us know how critical liberty is in every aspect of our lives. They can help you really understand that a nation and her people thrive when there is economic freedom, and how our government is uniquely formed with the express purpose of protecting the dignity and worth of every human being. It's too bad the members of the Judiciary Committee on the Democrat side don't take these courses and learn. For instance, there are very few institutions that dedicate their entire existence to helping us think through these things. The schools don't. The mass media certainly doesn't. Hillsdale College does. And my friend Dr. Larry Arnn, president of Hillsdale College, knows you hunger for truth and that our republic and way of life depends on American citizens, starting with you becoming advocates for basic truths. No matter your age, it's never too late to learn. And you can learn through their free online courses, their free subscription to Imprimis, and local free Hillsdale events. Here's what you do. Go to levinforhillsdale.com to see how Hillsdale can help you pursue truth and defend liberty. That's levinforhillsdale.com, Levin for Hillsdale.com. Definitely check it out. So there's a lot of really cool books out there right now. Our friend John Highbush, his book, fiction. Our friend Craig Shirley, his book, nonfiction. It comes out today. I want to encourage you really to take an opportunity to look at both books. They're really great books. And they're a lot of fun. They're very informative. And they're very good friends, by the way. John Highbush, Executive Director of the Reagan Library and Foundation. Craig Shirley, who's been there many, many times, as have I. Now, of course, my book doesn't come out till July 4th, but I am going to do an event, if they'll have me back, at the Reagan Library and a number of other places, which I will announce when we get closer to launch time. I mean, we're over 3 months away, so we have to be patient when it comes to rediscovering Americanism. Let's move quickly. David, St. Petersburg, Florida, the great WFLA. Go.
Thank you very much. Listen, I'm sick of the Republicans. They don't have an easy way to handle the Merrick Garland question. The Democrats keep whining that they weren't affirmed. all they have to do, instead of referring to old Joe Biden and other things, is just say this. That's checks and balances, folks. The people elected a Republican Congress to put a check on an out-of-control Obama to prevent him from putting someone on the court they didn't want. And suck it up. Elections have consequences. I wish the Republicans would help educate America about checks and balances and shut up these whiny Democrats.
All right, my friend. Penny, Philadelphia, Mississippi, on the Mark Levin app. Quickly, go.
Hi, Mark. I was just calling about the Obamacare repeal and replace. I believe that Ryan and the establishment know exactly what they're doing. They're putting forth a bill that really doesn't change anything, but at the same time, enough people hate it that it will not pass the House and the Senate. And then they can say, oh, we tried, they won't work with us. And then the Freedom Caucus, Ted Cruz, Tom Cotton, they're going to try to use it against those guys.
Maybe so. I think that's at least partly correct. Don't forget, we have a Levin surge right now, folks. 202-225-3121. Call your member of the House and tell them, vote no. We salute all you heroes out there. Check out Levin TV. It's a very important show tonight. Try out your 7-day free trial if you don't have it yet. And I'll see you on the radio tomorrow, America. God bless you.